Well, good afternoon, everybody. A pleasure to have your company. I'm Kate Burton, the moderator for today's really interesting discussion. We're going to wait until a few more people are able to join us from all different corners of the globe, not just here in Singapore. But thank you very much for participating. And we really want you to be involved as well. So do ask questions throughout using the chat function at the bottom, as we would love to hear from you as we weigh in on this, this buzzword that is sustainability. And what the PR industry is doing right and what it could be doing better. And it's certainly a hot topic of conversation. Well, I think we should kick off, and it is a pleasure to be with you this afternoon. As mentioned, I'm Kate Burton. I'm a broadcaster based in Singapore with a very keen interest in the environment. And let's face it, sustainability, it is the buzzword amongst companies and corporations, but are they delivering on their bold credentials? Sometimes they are being exposed, and it's not always the case. Well, I'm joined by an excellent panel this afternoon, and this event has been organised by Spurwing Communications. And from the panel and from Spurwing is Janissa, who joins us this afternoon. Hi, Janissa.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Kate. And thanks for joining us. Really amazing to see the numbers on this event grow at 80 people, and it's counting. I'm Janissa from Spurwing Communications. For those that don't know us, we're a specialist PR agency focusing on healthcare, food and nutrition sectors, and within which sustainability is a growing conversation. So Spurwing, if there's one thing that we come to work every day that we believe in, is that our work motivates people that matter. And for me, pulling this event together, if you look at the screen right now, the title of this event, actually that was what was in my head in the last few months. You know, PR and sustainability are my two big loves. It's my livelihood as well, and actually, and unfortunately, I've seen the gap between PR and sustainability widen. Some of you on the call, seeing this event, somebody actually messaged me to say that, you know, PR is nothing but a giant greenwashing machine. Well, I beg to differ, because I've also seen PR and communications being put to use to drive positive change, advocate for positive policies, and get people to act. So I do believe that there's a better way of doing things, but we have to come together as an industry to do this. So Spurwing, we're really excited to kind of lead this conversation, and thanks so much to Tara at PRCA for supporting us. And of course, I don't have all the answers. For that, I brought together this amazing panel of people that will help us unpack this issue today.
Fantastic. Thank you so much indeed, Jan. And so joining Jan this afternoon is Jonathan Parry from Roche. Hi, Jonathan.
Hi, Kate, and good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for having me on the panel today. So as Kate said, my name's Jonathan Parry. I work for Roche Diagnostics here in Asia Pacific. And within my role, I look after sustainability for Roche. Very much similar to Janissa, you know, communications and PR plus sustainability has really been my passion and my livelihood for the past few years. I've held a number of different corporate communications roles within both private and non-for-profit organizations. And I'm really looking forward to the discussion today. So thank you for having me.
Well, a pleasure to have you on board. And also joining us from the Straits Times is Audrey Tan with the best backdrop I think you'll find of our panelists that are with us this afternoon.
Thanks, Kate, and hi, everyone. Thanks to Spurwing for having me on today. As Kate mentioned, I am the Science and Environment Correspondent at the Straits Times. I joined in 2013, and since then I've been reporting a lot about sustainability issues in Singapore and also regionally. So I'm happy to be able to contribute in the ways that I can and learn from you guys as well.
Wonderful. Thank you, Audrey. And then finally joining us from Conservation International is Sarah Cragg. Hi, Sarah.
Hello, Kate. Hi, everybody. Really happy to be here and be involved in this exciting conversation. It sounds like it's definitely going to be a very good debate. So as Kate said, I'm Sarah Cragg. I'm Partnerships and Marketing Director for APAC for Conservation International. And my job is really to partner with companies and corporations to protect nature for the benefit of people. I previously worked in-house at both brand level and also agencies focused on sustainability and brand purpose. So very happy to be here and give you a bit of a opinion on what it's like from the NGO side as well as agency and in-house.
Excellent. Well, what a panel we have for you, and fantastic. We have 92 participants as well. So we're going to ask you, first of all, before we have the chance to take a deep dive and have a conversation with our panelists, we have a poll that we would like you to engage in. And the question for you, it will appear on your screen any moment now, is the PR industry can be an agent for change in sustainability. On a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being you strongly disagree with that, and 5 that you strongly agree, how much do you agree with this statement? And it's interesting, all seeing the barometers move. Most people are saying 4 and 5. So do believe that the PR industry is an agent for change in terms of sustainability. What we're going to do is actually come back to that at the end of our discussion just before 5 o'clock local time to see if your opinion has shifted at all after hearing from our panel. But Jan, let's start with you. Jan, you have worked for WWF. You're now in-house, you're in Spurwing Communications. How much pressure are companies under to bolster and push out their sustainability claims?
Needless to say, a lot. All of us on this call know it, and rightly so, because the science is out there. We know that there's a climate emergency. We know that there's a biodiversity crisis. We see this in the news as individuals, not even like as a PR person, right? Don't you get scared or worried when you see what's happening? But what's really great is that when people care about sustainability, they're also talking about holding our behaviors, holding brands, holding governments accountable for protecting our natural resources, for acting in a responsible way, protecting local communities as well. So I think this is a really positive development. You get people that are looking to businesses and expecting certain standards of doing business or ways of running even a country. But of course, with businesses, this is what's translating is you are seeing media report about it. You're seeing people write into you. You're also seeing regulations change across the world. And a lot of businesses, I think, are they understand it. They see their part in this. But with all this immense public pressure, I think they are kind of navigating how can they then respond to public pressure versus and also look at what they're actually doing and catch up with these expectations.
Yeah, I mean, we all want to be sustainable, but Sarah, sustainability, it's a very big word. And have we all got a complete grasp on what it actually means?
Thanks, Kate. I mean, sustainability is complex. I think that's one of those things that we all really need to understand. And the difficulty for us as communicators is that we want to make things as simple as possible. But often, I think a great example, and I'm sure we'll talk about this later, is plastic and plastic straws. The conversation has obviously started about plastic straws. We obviously know that is just the beginning of the conversation. So, for me, it is such a complex topic, but we need to kind of find those roots find the simplicity, find the way that we can engage and be creative. But then we need to always be pushing to take that conversation to the next level, always be pushing for more change, get that continuous momentum for change and for impact. We just need to make sure that the conversation continues, and we're really pushing for that impact and doesn't get stuck at that kind of simplistic level, which I think unfortunately sometimes it can do.
Yeah, it certainly can. And it is a challenge, Johnny. I know in your industry, in the healthcare, what challenges do you find in your job as you head up sustainability at Roche?
Yeah, well, I think, Janissa and Sarah did an excellent job of kind of summarizing some of the challenges that we face. And companies are under a huge amount of pressure from consumers, from governments who want to know that you're going to be doing long-term sustainable business in their countries. And then also, business partners, your customers, and the kind of people within the value chain with you. So yeah, working in sustainability kind of in this space is a challenge because it is so big. And Sarah brought up the comment around plastic straws. And I think that's one thing that we can all grasp, right? Because it's kind of been kind of the movement of our time, like in recent times. But it's a very short-term change that doesn't fix the longer-term problem. I think from our business side, what we need to try and do for our own employees, but also our business partners and the governments that we work with, is that a systems change approach is needed to sustainability. Like, we need to make changes that aren't just a quick fix, slapping a band-aid on a problem that we see right now. We need to fundamentally change how we approach what we do to make sure that we can all coexist for the long term in a way that benefits both people and planet.
Yeah, absolutely. And Audrey, from the Straits Times, I imagine you have been asked to cover some interesting events that were promoted as being sustainable, or stories that maybe in the end weren't so sustainable. What have you noticed in your experience with people grappling with the idea of what exactly is sustainability?
Yeah, I think a lot of journalists would have received like plenty of press releases nowadays announcing net zero goals, announcing other kinds of sustainability initiatives like not using plastic or not using straws. So I do think that companies need to have a better awareness about what is exactly driving the crisis that we are facing now, examining their own business models and determining whether the core business model is actually contributing to climate change, and then looking at their sustainability initiatives and assessing whether that actually like solves the problem. I think there were a couple of instances of, I think, companies pitching about how they are going to use less plastic and switch to paper bags instead, but they need to look at like the context, right? I think there has been a study, peer-reviewed published study by Nanyang Technological University researchers that showed that within the Singapore context, a single-use plastic bag could actually be more eco-friendly than a single-use paper bag or compostable bag. So I think we should not just use sustainability as a bandwagon that we should just jump on board because everyone else is doing it, but really look at the context, look at the situation, and then assess whether whatever message you're putting out is going to be greenwashy or not.
Oh, the word greenwashing has arrived. Yes, there's a lot of that happening right now. Audrey, you mentioned last week when we had the chance to first catch up about an event that you were invited to, and it was a sustainability event, but there was something really quite bizarre that was on the menu. Do share that with us.
Yeah, so many companies often try to engage with beat reporters to talk about their own sustainability initiatives. And in this case, I'm not going to mention the company, but a couple of us from various news outlets were invited to talk about this company's sustainability initiatives. And the first thing on the menu was shark fin. Of course, I did not eat it, but I did bring it up to the PR person after that. And I think the point was taken. But I mean, it's small things like that just really, I think it really just sends the wrong message.
Yeah, it certainly does. And, the term greenwashing, isn't it? Giving a false impression about your environmental credentials. We have got a slide and a couple of images that, if we can share that with you, that, well, I'm curious to know what reaction it prompts within yourselves. And if our tech team can share that slide. One is about a paper bottle. I am a paper bottle. And then, well, upon closer inspection, you certainly aren't a paper bottle. It was a paper bottle with a plastic bottle in the middle of it. Now, we consumers aren't silly. We're going to see through that. So that was a big PR blunder right there, wasn't it, Janissa?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it goes back to what Audrey was mentioning, people like, brands kind of offering paper in place of plastic. It's an ongoing conversation. There are a lot of, technical or longer term considerations, but of course, as communicators, or if you are, an ad person, designing this campaign idea, we have the obligation to also make it simple, and things get lost in translation. I think this is why there's also, as professionals within the industry, we have to hold ourselves accountable when we are, writing this press release or creating this ad about sustainability, to actually educate ourselves to know what it is. Because how do we organize a media event, invite Audrey to it, if we don't? If we don't even have a comprehensive idea of standards and expectations. So I think it needs to really come from like a personal education, personal passion, and make sure that you know what you're talking about before you actually go out and put it out there.
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned passion, and Sarah, for you, passion doesn't always mean it's correct. You might have an enthusiasm for the environment and you want to play your part. But this statue of the fearless girl, Sarah, can you shed some light on this story? It was very interesting.
Sure, and I'm sure lots of the creatives on the call will kind of recognize this because it's won huge number of awards. This was the fearless girl, which was staring down the bull on Wall Street. And at the time, it won lots of awards. It kind of appeared overnight. There was a big kind of frenzy of interest around it. People were really talking about girls' empowerment and women's empowerment at the time. But kind of very quickly, there was a little bit of backlash. Unfortunately, the backlash didn't get quite as much coverage as the awards. But it turned out that State Street advisors, who were the people who had paid for this piece of artwork and paid for the kind of creative, was actually being sued for $5 million because there was a huge gender pay gap between the women and men within their company. And I guess, you know, these are the kind of things where it's just not authentic. You know, if you want to be pushing your sustainability communications, it needs to be based on authenticity, transparency, and it needs to be based on action. And you know, that just wasn't the case here. And I'm glad that some people definitely at least know the story behind the Fearless Girl and the fact that it wasn't quite living up to what it was meant to be all about.
Yeah, but it's a tough job though, Sarah, isn't it, for these companies? But ad firms, their feet are being held to the fire. When you look at what's happening in the States with big oil companies, they are, you know, trying to push their environmental credentials, and they're treading on very thin ice. And they are starting to be held responsible for it, and the ad firms behind it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. There's like a big push at the moment. There's a kind of a new NGO or advocacy group called Clean Creatives, and they're really pushing the advertising and PR agency to say that they won't be working with fossil fuel companies while also kind of pushing out their sustainability credentials. And the same is also happening in other services for providers like lawyers, accountants. We're going to be seeing this more and more. You can't kind of come out and say you have all these amazing sustainability commitments while also profiteering from the fossil fuel industry. I think this will be something that we really see more and more of.
Jonathan, I see you're nodding in agreement. I mean, in your sector, the healthcare sector, how difficult do you find it when you do head up sustainability to push out your eco-credentials? Because what is sustainability in healthcare? Because it's different, isn't it, for different organisations?
Yes, yeah, well, I mean, firstly, it's incredibly broad, right? The impact that we can have as an industry in healthcare on society is huge, from the communities we work in, our own employees, the environment, and many other different factors. So kind of it's such a big topic, and I think therein kind of lies the challenge of talking about it, because at Roche, like speaking from my perspective in our organization, is kind of communications follows our sustainability efforts and not the other way around. You know, it's kind of embedded in our organization in terms of how we do business. We're nearly 125 years old, and, you know, we want to be here for another 125. So it kind of, interestingly, even talking about it internally, sometimes our internal employees don't even appreciate the full breadth of what they do to kind of contribute to sustainability, be it something as simple as reducing kind of plastics consumption in the workplace, right the way through to running programs that increase access to healthcare to marginalized communities. So it's incredibly broad. And the fact that we aren't consumer facing either kind of changes that dynamic a little bit. We don't have necessarily, you know, the brand name or the logo that everyone recognizes on a product. So kind of that changes the dynamic as well.
Yeah, and your definition of sustainability might be very different to Sarah's definition of sustainability as well. So it's all very nuanced, isn't it? Jan, having worked on both sides with WWF and now at Spurwing, what have you found has been the biggest discovery moving into the world of PR from being an NGO?
The thing is, I've always been, you know, a communicator, whether in an NGO or PR, but I think it's like the nature of what we are communicating about. I think on the PR side and with the industries, I think what we have to do a lot of is kind of work with clients, and, you know, it always starts with a conversation of, okay, I want to put something out there, and then, you know, working with clients to see whether this fits into their plans, or, you know, is this what they want to say about sustainability? But one thing that I appreciated a lot more as well, being in a PR agency right now, is seeing the different definitions of public relations and how it can be applied. It's not just about chasing headlines or working with media. There's a lot that goes on a daily basis, like creating internal communications, working with executives. And I think that this is this unseen areas, right, that's our work beyond, like, you know, beyond the headlines, where I think the industry can do a lot more. Because if you are saying, you know, sustainability is a growing conversation within an organization and we need internal buy-in, well, let's run an internal communications campaign. Let's see how we can get buy-in, get people excited about it within a company, so that then the company is actually, they have the people that can actually start creating the change as a business, but not enough is said about it.
Yeah, it's not. And Audrey, from a Straits Times perspective, as a journalist, Jan mentioned then about chasing headlines. That's what gets us to pick up the paper when we see a good, juicy headline. How difficult is it from your perspective as a member of the media to deliver the news and to be authentic when, you've got even the Singapore government is talking about the Green Plan, and it seems to be quite thin on detail. So that's what the Singapore government are wanting to do. They want to, road to net zero. We hear bandied about an awful lot. How difficult is it for you to remain true and authentic in your role as a member of the media when you have got some rather sketchy campaigns?
For me, it would be to stick to the facts. We don't write about every sustainability press release that lands in our inbox. No matter how many times you try to email me, if I'm not convinced by your pitch, I'm just going to ignore it. And I think that happens a lot. For the Green Plan, it's slightly different because it's not just a pitch, right? It sets a national agenda, it sets a tone. Previously, we did not have a Green Plan. I wouldn't say that Green Plan is the most ambitious thing, but it does set a kind of a national agenda tone when you have so many ministers coming together to do outreach themselves in the forms of a video, in the forms of setting out clear targets that they can be held accountable to. If the media goes back to them and say, hey, it's 2030, what have we achieved? There are some benchmarks that have to be met. So for me, I would really look at science, look at data that shows, in order to support the points that you are making. And I would like to say that I have written commentaries that talked about how the Green Plan is not ambitious enough, how it's actually a compilation of existing sustainability initiatives, and I stand by that statement. And one needs only look at the strategies laid out in the Green Plan to know that and compare it with other plans that Singapore has announced before. There's a couple of new points, but a lot of it was a rehash of things that have already been said. So I don't think the media would shy away from pointing out greenwashing when we do see it.
Yeah, for sure. And the consumer, of course, Sarah, we're not silly. We know what's going on. We can read between the lines.
Yeah, of course. And I think, again, it kind of all comes back to authenticity and action. You need to be transparent about what you're doing and actually be doing something. I think it's all about the journey that you're on. It's about highlighting the impact. It's being aware of the impact that you're having, not just really thinking about the impact that you as a company are having. It should come from the inside of the company. You shouldn't be looking at what are the 10 trends in sustainability in 2021 and working off that list. You should be looking at your company, looking at the impact you have, and then tackling the biggest impacts first. So it's really got to be this kind of inside out approach rather than the other way around, which I think sometimes companies can get a little kind of confused in. Maybe if the public's always talking about plastics, for example, they can feel that, oh, well, sustainability for us is, ditching the straws or something like that. Where actually, if you're a company that has a huge water, electricity, carbon issues, you really need to focus on the big issues for your company. And it's complex. So you need to then find the partners to help you do that. No one expects you to be able to solve all the problems by yourself. We just expect you to be kind of taking the right steps to try to limit that impact.
Yeah, and when you talk about that point, working from the inside out, not the outside in, that's so valid, isn't it? Johnny, I see you shaking your head there because, as sustainability for you, how do you tackle it then with Roche and that inside out rather than outside in mentality?
Yeah, so I think Sarah made some great points there around awareness and transparency. And I think therein lies some of the challenge for either internally or externally or us as individuals. Kind of getting the full picture is really, really important to know where we can have an impact. We all kind of occupy a small space in the world, in government organizations, in value chains. And we kind of need to see the full picture to see where we really need to play and what we can change for kind of sustained impact. So internally, we look at where do we as an organization have touch points with governments and with the communities that we work in? How do we make sure that we're creating a sustainable environment for our employees to work? How do we ensure that we're constantly innovating and be more diverse to make sure that everything we're contributing is sustainable in the long term and having a positive impact where we can? And Sarah's right, like looking to partner, like where can we do better? Because we need help, and kind of having the transparency to know where those spaces are, and then the courage to go out and ask for help and hold each other accountable.
Yeah, asking for help, asking an expert. Jan, there's some great questions that have come in, and I've just seen Syed Mohammed was saying a very well made point there, Sarah. You know, sustainability must be done to address your own industry challenges and problems, and it's being honest and accept responsibility, and the change will be successful. Jan, he makes a good point, doesn't he, Syed?
As well, but I think sustainability is also a process. So, you know, we want to make sure that we are creating that transparency and openness, but it's not an easy journey for companies or brands. It's always long term. So you can always set a target, but then, you know, how do you make sure that you're transparent and communicating about it? Yeah.
Yeah. Question in from Tom Gwynn, which is, should companies be claiming they are net zero when they only offset, decarbonize 1+2 emissions? I believe that's what he's saying. You know, they don't offset all 3 activities. Sarah, what are your thoughts on this? You know, we'd love to say we're net zero. That is a massive claim to make. And you can't just go and buy a couple of, you know, mangroves in Indonesia and then go, voila, that's the job done.
Yeah, I mean, it's really complex. There's no kind of perfect solutions. CI, we do work in the nature-based solution space and have premium carbon offsets. So, you know, I'm obviously coming from a position where I'm not totally against offsets, certified kind of official offsets. But, you know, step 1 is decarbonization, and it always has to be, the focus is decarbonization. That is what it's all about. You know, it's very easy to say, and there's a lot of pressure on companies at the moment, you know, the UN and COP coming up. There's a big kind of campaign to really get companies and countries and governments to all announce that they're net zero. But, you know, we need to really think about what this really means. As I'm not sure who asked the question, but as the person who asked the question, you know, are they really thinking about all the 3 different kind of scopes? You know, these are really important questions. And I guess you know, communicators, we're going to try and simplify things, but for consumers, we need to be saying, well, what exactly does net zero mean to you? Does it include all the scopes? When you say offsetting, what exactly do you mean? Like, are you just planting trees? Because as I've learned at Conservation International, that's a lot harder than it seems. It's really got to be certain trees in certain places. Sometimes you're actually better off protecting rainforests that are going to be cut down. So, you know, all of these things are unfortunately more complex. So I think it's really for us as consumers and people who care about this to be kind of asking the difficult questions and really making sure that companies are really living up to what they say they are doing, and, you know, being transparent, because only by then will they be forced into being transparent and really trying to do these things properly.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a few good questions that have come in. This is one from Nina. How do you advise companies, clients, to look into building up concrete sustainability initiatives before they start communicating to their audience? I mean, that's the key, isn't it? That's what we're doing. You don't want to rush ahead and just throw out a press release that Audrey's going to have, that's going to receive in her inbox saying, please, you know, we're net zero, we're, you know, we're offsetting, and we are, you know, very sustainable, when you've got to do your homework. But is it the case though, Jan, that a company like Spurwing, you know, if somebody's all of a sudden charged with, you're heading up our sustainability department, it's like, you might have an interest in it, but you know, it doesn't mean to say that you're an expert on it. And we need to be asking those questions, because you're putting individual employees under a huge amount of pressure.
And I think this is where I think companies can also, you know, look into partnerships and building up that kind of, you know, support. It's not no single, you know, sorry, Johnny, but sustainability person, right? You're one person covering APAC. You know, no single person has all the answers. I do think that for brands, especially with all the external pressure, there's really a lot of value in brands looking to partner with NGOs looking to see how they can better engage, so that when you are actually going out, so you're getting science-based guidance. You're not just guessing based on newspaper articles about plastic straws. And you're also maybe supporting and working with the organization in a meaningful way, in a long-term manner, and transforming your business. So I think there is a lot of value in acknowledging that, yes, we are not perfect. We are not there with sustainability. We don't know what's going on. Would love to find some partners. And maybe this is where, for communicators or the PR industry, we can also be a bridge. Again, it's not just about chasing headlines for us. The stakeholders of your clients. We can find partners that can value add as well. And I think that this is as much part of the sustainability journey as it is, when you reach the end, I kind of want to talk about it.
Yeah, and the sustainability journey. I mean, is there a sustainability hotline we can all call, just to be able to get the quick, yes, you're doing it right. That's a credible story. You could push that out and push that narrative out. Sarah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, I think a lot of companies get too in their own heads. Something that might have been very difficult for you as an organization to manage doesn't mean that it's particularly exciting to the rest of the world. Sustainability is difficult and we all need to make changes. So I would suggest you always test ideas with experts and partners, partners like myself, NGOs. We're always willing to get involved. This is how our theory of change. This is how we have impact. So we're always willing to get involved, have conversations. There's huge numbers of consultants out there who are very specialized in the different areas, decarbonization, all of these different things, depending on what industry it's in. So I don't think there's really any excuse to not kind of be out there, going out there and talking to people and finding out what industry norms. If we're gonna make the changes that we need to all do it together. So things like coalitions and industry kind of partnerships, all of these things are going to be really important, and we all have to work together to do it.
Yeah, Oliver Budgeon asks about Singapore. How is Singapore performing? Is it doing a good job? Is it keeping up with the West, or is it leading by example? Who would like to weigh in on this? Jan, love to hear your thoughts. Is Singapore punching above its weight when it comes to sustainability?
I think for sure any country can always do more, and that's what I believe as an individual. But I think I've seen tremendous change in Singapore over the past 5 years or more, with that momentum amongst businesses, people, and actually this is translating to, maybe the green plan is still on its way there, but we are seeing this translate to businesses and ESG reporting. We are seeing this translate to national policy. So there really is that momentum, but I think I think it needs to be an ongoing process. And I think my big question for myself and my industry is, where's the PR industry in this? Are we contributing a productive conversation to what's needed for Singapore to go to the next stage, or are we obscuring what needs to be done?
Yeah, Sarah, your thoughts on Singapore's performance when it comes to sustainability?
So I think, as Jan said, all countries can do more. I'd say that what gives me a great hope for Singapore is that when Singapore wants to do something, it really makes it happen. And I think we're really starting to see that change over the last year. There's been numerous announcements for the government. We're seeing this real change, particularly with the financial industry, and a lot of that is being kind of encouraged by the government. So it may be that some other countries are ahead in terms of what they have publicly committed to. But what brings me a lot of hope, and I'm really looking forward to seeing, is the big announcements, because we know that when Singapore decides to do something, it'll invest in that heavily and it will do it kind of to the best of its ability. So I guess I'm optimistic that we'll see a lot more change in the future.
Good, yeah.
Maybe I can jump in here, Kate, on the question on Singapore. Okay, so I think that there's two different ways of looking at it. If you are looking at in terms of what Singapore is doing to cut its emissions, obviously we are not doing enough, right? We are still reliant on fossil fuels for our energy. They always say it's natural gas is the cleanest form of fossil fuel, but it's still a fossil fuel. And it's still producing carbon dioxide. So that's one. But I think in terms of internationally, we need to, other countries are looking at Singapore as a small contributor, right? 0.11%. we can do more. I think the activists here in Singapore and in the region are looking at the country to decarbonize faster. But in another way of looking at it would be, I think Singapore is a hotbed of innovation, right? There's a lot of innovation going on into how I can contextualize a solar panel that's manufactured in the US, for instance. How can I deploy in the tropics and make efficient use of it? And the technologies that are developed here in Singapore could be useful for other cities that are facing the same constraints as us. They are highly built up and highly urbanized. They might not have large spaces for solar panels. The innovations in terms of our alternative meats, for instance, could also help reduce the carbon footprint of food while also increasing food security for various cities. So it depends on how you look at it. Do you think Singapore should do more in terms of decarbonizing? For sure. But on the other hand, there's also a lot of innovation, technological innovations going on here, which could have an impact on countries facing the same problems as us elsewhere.
Yeah, that's so well said, Audrey. When you talk about innovation, Bill Gates has got a book out, How to Avoid a Climate Disaster. If you haven't read it, I'd recommend it. It's a very interesting read. And it is going to be about innovation to get us out of this carbon mess that we find ourselves. So, Johnny, your thoughts on this? What how would you like to weigh in?
Well, I think, looking at Singapore as a country, it's very, very small. The overall impact, obviously, on the world stage is minimal. But I think to Audrey's point, through innovation, Singapore, and it does this in many different ways, right, as a hub of innovation, can support other countries to do more as well. And I think in terms of just us as people living and working here in Singapore, we're a fairly captive audience. We're all very well connected. It's small, it's easy to reach us. So from a communications perspective, if we are, as communicators, sending out the right messages and giving people the knowledge they need to make real change, I actually think Singapore is one place that it'd be fairly easy to do that, right, from a consumer perspective. And then I think kind of the way the government sits itself on the world stage and leverages its kind of hub of innovation, it could be a real driver for change around the world.
Yeah, I think Singapore is the first country, isn't it, to have, we're talking about plant-based meats, a chicken set up.
Cell cultured.
Yeah.
The first country to approve the cell cultured chicken, yeah. I saw a lot of questions asking like, how can we make individual action linked to systemic change? Actually, that is a big problem, I feel, even for us as journalists communicating the climate change problem. Of course, we all know that systemic change is needed. But I guess I also hold the unpopular opinion that individual action does matter, simply because if people recognize the value of working and speaking with this collective voice, it could lead to systemic change. Just look at how long Singapore took to reach a stage where our government is finally considering charging for plastic bags. That took numerous failed experiments. And I guess I would say maybe the courage or the boldness of NTUC to be the first one to say, okay, you know what, I'm going to start a trial to charge for bags and I'm going to scale it up. And I think that it is incremental, and I think we should not discount the fact that individual action can lead to systemic change. And also the fact that you don't want to bore people with the doom and gloom narrative all the time, right? People want to know what they can do to help. And I think businesses that offer them the opportunity to do that are important. But whether or not they should get publicity for it, that's another discussion.
Yeah. Well, when you look at the company IKEA here in Singapore, it banned plastic. Well, it didn't ban them, just charges you if you want to buy a plastic bag. It hasn't hit their profits. It's been a very good thing. So you do have to be bold. And it is an inconvenient truth, as Al Gore said all those years ago. We want to be doing the right thing, and we all have to be individually responsible as well. It's very easy, isn't it, to make these bold claims and criticize these companies. But you've got to understand that these companies still have business. They still have to make a profit. So it's so difficult, Sarah, to find that balance.
Yeah, it is definitely difficult, and no one's saying you have to change overnight. I think people appreciate honesty, and everyone appreciates it's a journey. But I think everyone also needs to see change. So if you don't need to promise that you will fix everything today, but you have to be working on that solution. So that we see change and we know you're making impact, and those changes need to be invested in. and they need to be, you need to be truthful. I think it's what's really kind of destroying the trust in companies is kind of things like you showed earlier with the kind of paper plastic bottle. It's when there's kind of almost blatant lying or blatant covering up. I think, we've seen it for a long time in the fossil fuel industry where, oh, we're investing in renewables. But if you actually look at the amount invested in renewables compared to the amount spent on the rest of the company, it's absolutely minuscule. So, I think it's not that you have to have all the solutions. You just need to be honest and you need to be doing the right thing.
Can I jump in? I think that there's so much power with us having access to the public space, right? Whether Audrey's writing a headline or for me a press release, and making sure that we are putting out the information that people actually need to act on. We talk about speaking the truth, but to be honest, when you write a press release or if you put out news about your company, you want to focus on the 1% that sounds really good and ignore the 99% that you're still working on. So why do we hold ourselves to a standard where everything needs to sound rosy when it is still a process and you have to acknowledge the 99%? Or, Audrey talked about individual action. And yes, I think it's also really powerful if you're a brand that's going out and talking about, your efforts, talking proudly about your efforts to cut your emissions. You can also use that to maybe help individuals understand what they can do or what are the standards you're holding yourself up to so that they understand that in a simple way. But also, why stop at individuals? Businesses should also look at holding the rest of their industry or the peers accountable for the same standards, or even using the momentum that they have to push for national kind of action. So we always talk about systemic change. It requires people to come together, but most of the time, we focus on only the bright, shiny things that businesses are doing. Or, an ad tells individual consumers that they have to, stop plastic straws and that's going to save the world. It's not.
Yeah. The plastic straws, it comes back again, doesn't it? I mean, anybody who's seen Seaspiracy, I should say, the documentary that was out, that got a lot of attention where we were all woken up to find out that fishing nets, on Seaspiracy, they cause 50% of the plastic pollution in the ocean. And here we all are, banging on and beating the drum like, don't use that plastic straw today, but we're avoiding the big issue, which, is now staring us in the face, but we're not that comfortable when it comes to talking about it. It is that inconvenient truth. Sarah, we talked about events and how certainly in the PR industry, when there are the dates throughout the year, like International Women's Day, it might be a case of, I'm going to wear a pink top, or I'm going to, I support women on Women's Day. What else could companies be doing?
Yeah, thanks, Kate. I guess this is a drum I keep on banging, but it's important to raise awareness and it's important to talk about these issues, but talk is not enough and raising awareness is not enough. You've got to take action. So as I think I mentioned to you, for next International Women's Day, I'm going to be kind of taking a picture of a policy that is supportive of women from my NGO and saying, this makes a difference to me. What does your company do? And that should not be the minimum legal requirement. That should be something that really makes a difference. Extended maternity leave, extended paternity leave, like these kind of things that actually make a difference. Like, we've recently in the US had, Pride Month. So, where are the policies which show that gay couples get the same rights as heterosexual couples? Like, these are the things that really make a difference, not just having a rainbow on your LinkedIn.
Yeah, good point. A question's come in from Robin Hicks, who is a journalist with Eco Business Insider. It's brilliant, worth following him for sure. He's asking the question, can PR agencies be expected to push back against clients who want to push out a message that is greenwashy? Johnny,
Yeah, so I mean, as a client, I would really, really hope that my PR agency would tell me if what I was putting out there was greenwashing. Firstly, I really hope that I would be kind of sensitive to the issue enough to kind of know that that's never a good idea anyway. But the reality is, I mean, look, we've just put up a slide of an Innisfree bottle that was clearly plastic and not made of cardboard, right? Like the backlash of miscommunication, or, Jan, you mentioned earlier, focusing on the 1% that we're doing well rather than 99% that we're not. It just completely undermines the credibility of an organization kind of in the sustainability space. And I also think kind of communicating about the areas that we're not so good can open up opportunities for collaboration where other people are good in those spaces. So it's kind of where being brave and speaking up and being transparent can actually have great benefit. So, I mean, to Robin's question, like as a client, I would really, really hope that my PR agency would push back if I was going to put something out there that would look like we were greenwashing something.
Yeah, Jan.
Yeah, no, to be fair, I just wanted to, like, I've heard from different businesses or clients, right, when they, sustainability targets that are set globally, but they have to see how it translates to the region. I've also heard on multiple occasions people say, I can't talk about this, I don't believe in it, because currently, while we have these global commitments, it needs to be something that we own in the country or in the region before it becomes something meaningful for them to talk about. So I think that there's this awareness, actually, to be fair, to give Robin a different perspective.
Yeah. Emma has a question. This is for Audrey. Audrey, what's your view on the role of PR in keeping sustainability on the news agenda?
So, okay, when we talk about PR, are we talking about PR from a company or corporate communications? Because I feel that there is kind of a difference. I would say that usually when I speak to people from PR companies, because they handle so many clients, they don't really know what the pitch is about. It seems like a copy and paste from whatever their client asked them to send. When we try to probe for details, it does not seem that they know their stuff well enough. So I think, whereas for corporate communications agencies or corporate communications managers who work within a company, they seem more aware of whatever criticism the company might get or how to tackle that. So I feel that PR agencies maybe could improve on this by having more in-depth knowledge about the industry that they're covering and aware of the challenges and the criticisms being leveled against them. So when journalists come to you with a query, when we ask sensitive questions or we ask about the criticisms that the company has and needs to be dealt with, it does not come across as very defensive, I feel. Yeah, and I would say it's also not just the role of PR agencies or corporate communications personnel to get sustainability out to the layman, to the mainstream. I mean, journalists have a part, right? Looking for stories. Companies themselves, in terms of being bold enough to take certain steps, and not just jumping on the bandwagon, but being the first to come out and say that, hey, I'm going to take these bold steps. I'm gonna like move the needle. So maybe the first few companies that made bold net zero pledges, they might be worth listening to more than companies who are all now claiming net zero. Because what does that really mean? And I mean, just now someone mentioned the issue of offsets. That's a really, I think, important topic that has become a lot more mainstream nowadays. And I think Sarah mentioned about the need to be transparent, and I fully 100% agree with that. If you have announced a net zero goal, be transparent about how exactly are you going to get there. And if you're buying offsets, which companies are you buying offsets from? Because without all this data, how can the public hold you accountable? I mean, on the issue of offsets, I think the Nature Conservancy came under, they got a lot of flack because some of the forest carbon credits that they were selling were forests that were not under threat of being cut down in the first place. So you are selling credits that are meaningless. So I think it's being transparent is really important, and I guess from the public-facing communications people, it's our job from you guys' perspective and also from Jenny's perspective to ensure that there is transparency, that people can hold them up to their claims.
Yeah, being transparent, being honest, being authentic, words that we have talked about this afternoon. Jonathan, a question in from Emma, who's asking, what would you say is the one thing that the corporates listening on this panel can do to build change inside out?
I think just talk more about sustainability, talk about what it means to your organization, talk to business leaders about why sustainable business makes good business sense. Just really promote the ways that people can be involved, be them small or large. And I think as people within an organization become more familiar with what sustainability means in its broader sense and where they play a role, improving sustainability for their organization, people will inevitably want to do more. Like sustainability is it's a nice thing. People want to do it. Sometimes we don't do enough because it may be a bit inconvenient or whatever the reason might be. But I think inevitably, by talking about it internally, you'll always find champions that get really, really passionate about it. And I mean, as communications, our role can be as a connector, as a knowledge provider, but ultimately we can change business practices. So that's really what needs to change. You need to build this network of internal champions that will go out and do more, but also put pressure on the business to change as well. The same goes for things like Sarah's mentioning, Pride Month and diversity and inclusion. It kind of to the same cloth, like it works the same way. But we need to create a drive to actually want to change.
Yeah, well said. Well, so it's a good question that's coming from Wendy Chung. It's quite a long question. I'll read the last part of it. And Jan, I can see you're nodding, so I'd love for you to give us your thoughts on it. But are agencies also brushing up on their own expertise in sustainability to give clients who might not be as advanced the advice that they need?
I hope so, Wendy. I think that's a great question and challenge for the PR industry when we are responding to the demand by brands to talk about sustainability. So I hope that people in PR agencies are also doing their part. I know I am because I'm passionate about it. And I think it's also I just wanted to share an experience. What prompted me to join Spurwing and believe in the work that we do was because when I was in WWF, PR agencies approaching me asking for our stamp of approval for World Sea Turtle Day, for example. So I realized that something was really going really wrong in Singapore in the industry, and I think we have a real opportunity now together as an industry to really set some standards, apply all the discussions and the learnings that we've had today, and to make sure that we are doing our part and not greenwashing clients or not even giving clients the proper guidance that they have.
Yeah, well said. From Conservation International perspective, Sarah, have you had some rather unbelievable approaches from companies wanting your help or to put a nice CI logo on their business when they haven't really deserved it?
To be honest, not. I've only been at CI for the last kind of 4 months. So I would say actually, surprisingly, I think companies can be quite scared of NGOs and kind of, obviously there are a vast array of different types of NGOs. You've got the more activist NGOs like Greenpeace, who, maybe some companies should be scared of and are right to be scared of, probably because they deserve it. But, that's definitely not what CI is about. We're much more about kind of working kind of with different organizations, civil societies, businesses to try to find solutions that work both for business and for nature. So I haven't actually had anything kind of particularly ridiculous, actually. I think people are quite cautious about trying to approach, or they're asking for help, rightly so. And I guess again, just referring back to Jan's point, I think again it's about transparency. If PR agencies need to say that they're working on upskilling on these issues, they're not experts in it. Those are different things. You've seen that 200, I think PwC have just announced they're going to have 200,000 hire 2,000 ESG experts in the next couple of years. There are definitely not 200,000 just ESG experts sitting out there not doing anything yet, because ESG has just kind of gone through the roof. So, people have to be trained, and they shouldn't be saying that they've ESG experts for the last 10 years, because that's just not true. Because ESG, there are maybe few people who have been working on it for the last 10 years, but it just hasn't been existed. So just to add to that, I think, agencies, service providers also all have to be transparent on what actual expertise they have. But yeah, I'm afraid I don't have any ridiculous stories about approaches, because we're always willing to talk to companies and try to help them become better. And in general, they are kind of coming to us with the view to trying to improve.
Yeah, absolutely. We've only got 5 minutes remaining, and a question that I would like to ask you all, and if there's any other questions, I know there's plenty in there. Hopefully we've covered the full range of topics, only just skimming the surface right now. But guys, a question for you to finish up with is that what aren't we talking about that we should be? What is there anything that you think, like straws? For example, everyone was talking about straws when fishing nets. If you watch Seaspiracy and you believe what they said, that's the big problem. So what is it now in 2021 We're in a world that's crippled by a pandemic, but sustainability is right up there. Climate change is one of the pressing issues of our time. But what aren't we talking about that we should be? Jan?
Honestly, over the course of the last hour, one thing that I kept asking myself is the next time I have to tackle, a request like this, how would I handle it? I think one thing I'm genuinely asking myself is, can I, when writing a press release or headline, for example, give the good news, but also be really honest and transparent to go, okay, we are doing this, but we have a long way to go, and this is what we're going to be delivering in the next few years. Or we are planting trees, as Audrey said, but we also acknowledge that, we are also clear about transparency of the impact of our actions. So kind of making sure that we are not just giving one side of the story, but being brave and acknowledging that it's not easy, it's always a process, and giving as communicators, balancing that message. I'm really wondering whether I can do it. I think it's a challenge for everybody that's listening to this as well.
Okay, good point. Johnny?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think the one thing we can do better is really to tell the full story and to paint the big picture, so we really see where we have an impact and where we need to improve. And I think kind of at the beginning, Kate, you said about sustainability being a buzzword. Well, hopefully one day it won't be. It will just be the way we do business, and it has to be at some point if we kind of want this planet to be around forever. So yeah, I think that's where we really need to improve, is just telling this big story and not latching on to whatever the hot topic of the month is, and really educating people on the full picture.
Yep, great. Audrey, what would you say? What's one thing we aren't talking about that we should be?
I would say probably the devil's in the details, and the details are missing in a lot of letters. We've already kind of seen a shift away from like just plastic straws and plastic bags to now net zero pledges, right? That kind of shows a broader understanding about what is driving the crisis that we are facing today. But what's next? How are we going to reach net zero? What are the steps the companies are taking to reach net zero? What are the steps that countries are taking to reach net zero? And I think that's what's missing in all these press releases about net zero targets.
Yeah, the devil is in the detail, isn't it, Sarah?
100%, and completely agree, Audrey. I guess I'd hate to say one thing, because I think that that goes against totally the kind of inside out approach. But I'd say what's next? Like, there's so much to be done. Unfortunately, we can't stop and congratulate ourselves too much. As sustainability person's work at the moment is never done. So you've done whatever you've just done. You've achieved it. You've worked very hard to do it. Celebrate, get the story out there, and then what's next, and focus on the big things first.
Yeah, and asking yourself good questions, isn't it? If you ask better questions of yourself, the answers lie within. Being authentic, being honest, what is the right message to send out, and it is being true to yourself. Now, I think we have got to wrap up this webinar. There were a number of questions that were asked. I hope we covered most of them. We're going to go back to the poll. So I don't know if your thoughts have changed over the last hour after hearing from our panel. And the question was, the PR industry can be an agent for change in sustainability on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being strongly disagree, and 5 being strongly agree. How much do you agree with this statement? So we're 51% saying 4. So that the PR industry is definitely an agent for change in sustainability. So well done to you, the panel, for sharing your insights. And Jan, moving forward, we do want to thank yourself at Spurwing and also the PRCA as well for having this event. But it's not the end of the discussion at all.
I think this is just the start. So I think it's a shout out for anyone that's listening to this. And if you're in industry, join me. I think what we want to do is to bring the industry together, to have what the insights that we are getting through this discussion about honesty and transparency, but let's make it practice and a given within the industry. Why not? And I think we're only at the starting point. So contact PRCA. Tara, please put in your contact details inside. We're going to be setting up a sustainability working group. So if you're interested, just reach out. I think we're just going to come together to really see how we can put our heads together as an industry. And end up on the right side of history, actually. the good stuff is going to come.
Good stuff. So a working group moving forward, that will be key. And so let's keep this conversation going. But what I would like to do is thank our panelists. How lovely to hear from you. Thank you as well for weighing in with your own questions too. Hope they have been answered. And it might just make you think a little bit more about what we're going to ask ourselves when it comes to living a sustainable life and what we can each do to minimise our own carbon footprint. So thank you very much. Goodbye from our panel. We look forward to joining you at some point in the future along our sustainability journey. Bye-bye.